You don't overthink because you're curious. You don't overthink because you're intelligent. You overthink because, somewhere along the way, your mind learned that safety lives in anticipation. You lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations that already happened. You imagine futures that haven't arrived. You dissect moments that should have been allowed to die quietly in the past. And while the world around you sleeps, your mind stays awake, standing guard like a soldier who never received the message that the war is over. You call it thinking. But deep down, it feels more like watching. Watching for the tone in someone's voice that might change. Watching for the pause in a text that might mean rejection. Watching for the subtle shift in energy that might mean you've done something wrong. And so you stay ahead of life by running mental simulations of every possible outcome. You rehearse conversations. You plan responses. You predict reactions. You create escape routes before you even enter the room. Because somewhere in your nervous system, a quiet rule was written. If I can see it coming, it can't hurt me. And here lies the paradox. The very thing that once protected you is now the thing that keeps you trapped. Your mind became a shelter. Then it became a cage. You wanted peace. So you built a system of constant awareness. But awareness turned into vigilance. Vigilance turned into tension. And tension turned into a life where rest feels dangerous. Because when you stop thinking, something might happen. So you stay awake in your own head, even when the world is offering you silence. This is the hidden psychology of the overthinker. Not a mind that thinks too much, but a nervous system that never learned how to feel safe without control. To understand the overthinker, you don't start with the mind. You start with the body. Modern psychology tells us that thought is often the last step in a much deeper biological process. Before a belief forms, before a narrative emerges, before a worry takes shape, something happens in the nervous system first. A signal, a tension, a subtle activation. This is where the concept of hypervigilance enters. Hypervigilance is a state in which the nervous system remains in a low-grade, threat detection mode, even when no immediate danger is present. The body becomes a radar system, constantly scanning the environment for emotional, social, or psychological risk. For the overthinker, the mind becomes the command center for this radar. Thought becomes a form of surveillance. Now layer this with the default mode network, a system in the brain that activates when you are not focused on the outside world. It is responsible for self-reflection, memory recall, future projection, and narrative building. In healthy minds, it turns on and off like a tide. But in the overthinker, this network becomes a permanent broadcast. Your mind is never in neutral. It is always telling a story, and the story is usually about what might go wrong. Then comes attachment theory, specifically anxious or avoidant attachment. When emotional safety in early relationships feels inconsistent, the mind learns that connection must be monitored. Love becomes something you manage, not something you rest inside. So you learn to read people the way others read maps. You analyze moods like weather patterns. You predict emotional storms before they arrive. And finally, there is cognitive rumination, the psychological loop where the mind returns to the same thought again and again, not to solve it, but to keep it active. Because as long as you're thinking, you're not feeling. Overthinking is not about intelligence. It's about regulation. Your mind became a tool for emotional survival, a lighthouse in a sea that once felt unpredictable. But here's what no one tells you. Lighthouses were never meant to be lived inside. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The overthinker lives inside this sentence. Because what looks like personality on the outside is often unconscious protection on the inside. You don't hesitate because you're indecisive. You hesitate because every choice feels like a door that might close behind you forever. You don't replay conversations because you enjoy analyzing. You replay them because you are searching for the moment where you might have lost someone else's approval, safety, or affection. And slowly, quietly, something sacred begins to disappear. You stop living in moments and start auditing them. You stop experiencing life and start evaluating it. Joy becomes something you check for risks inside. Connection becomes something you measure for danger. And beneath all of it is a single, aching fear. If I relax, I will miss something important. So you stay tense. You stay sharp. You stay ready. But readiness has a price. It costs you presence. It costs you ease. It costs you the kind of laughter that happens without thinking. The kind of love that happens without calculating. the kind of peace that happens without permission. You become very good at surviving and very unfamiliar with living. This is the invisible grief of the overthinker, not the grief of losing people, but the grief of losing yourself inside your own mind. You sacrifice authenticity for safety. You trade vulnerability for preparedness. You choose control over connection. And slowly, you become someone who feels deeply, but rarely feels freely. Overthinking doesn't stay in the mind. It moves into every corner of your adult life, and it disguises itself as just how I am. But these are not personality traits. These are coping strategies. You might become someone who, 1. Overexplains everything, because being misunderstood once felt like emotional danger. So now, you build verbal safety nets around every sentence you speak. 2. Struggles with boundaries, because you learn that saying no might cost you connection. So you say yes and resent it quietly. 3. Delays decisions, because choosing feels like committing to a future where something could go wrong. So you stay in the hallway between doors. 4. Feels responsible for other people's emotions. You become the emotional weather forecaster. If someone is upset, you assume it's your fault or your job to fix it. 5. Romanticizes potential instead of reality. You stay in situations not because they are good, but because they might become good. 6. Lives in mental exhaustion. You are always tired, but not from doing, from thinking. And here is the turning point most people never reach. Healing does not begin by stopping the thoughts. It begins by witnessing the pain underneath them. Instead of asking, how do I stop overthinking? You ask, what am I trying to protect? Because every mental loop is guarding something vulnerable. A younger version of you. A moment where you felt unseen. A time when safety felt uncertain. The mind is not your enemy. It is a loyal bodyguard that never learned how to clock out. Healing for the overthinker is not about becoming quieter. It's about becoming softer. This is where inner child reparenting begins. You stop talking to yourself like a commander giving orders, and start talking to yourself like a guardian offering safety. Instead of, why am I like this? You say, of course I'm like this. Look at what I survived. This is where shadow work enters. The practice of meeting the parts of yourself you've been trying to manage, suppress, or outthink. The anxious part, the fearful part, the part that still believes love must be earned. And instead of fixing them, you sit with them. Because safety is not a thought. It is a felt experience. It lives in the body, in breath, in stillness, in moments where nothing is being solved. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." The overthinker is not afraid of failure. They are afraid of possibility. Because possibility means uncertainty. And uncertainty feels like standing without armor. So healing becomes the radical act of standing anyway. Letting moments be imperfect. Letting conversations be messy. Letting life be unscripted. Not because it's safe, but because it's alive. And here is the truth that changes everything. You were never meant to be fixed. You were meant to be whole. Whole with your sensitivity. Whole with your awareness. Whole with your depth, but not trapped inside it. So if you are an overthinker, hear this. Your mind learned to protect you because you were once in a world that felt unpredictable, but you are not there anymore. You are here, and here you are allowed to rest. If this spoke to something inside you, share it with someone who lives inside their own thoughts. And remember, you don't need to think your way into peace. You need to feel your way into safety, because the goal was never to become someone who thinks less. The goal was always to become someone who lives more.